The sound of gunfire echoed across the prairie as the three Harrington sisters huddled in the corner of their cabin, clutching each other's hands with fear etched upon their faces. It was the spring of 1876, and what had begun as a dream of prosperity in the Dakota Territory had descended into a nightmare none of them could have foreseen. Jessica, the eldest at 23, peered through the small window at the thick plumes of smoke rising from neighboring homesteads. Her auburn hair was tied back hastily, dirt smudged across her freckled cheeks. "I can't believe they just left us here," she whispered, her voice trembling with both rage and terror. Julia, 21, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief that had once been white but was now stained with tears and dust. "William promised me," she said, her voice hollow. "He swore he would protect me always." The youngest, Josephine, barely 19, sat in stunned silence, her blue eyes wide with disbelief. The gold band on her finger caught the dim light filtering through the cabin's dirty window. 3 months married and now abandoned. Just days earlier, rumors had spread through the settlement about tensions with the nearby Lakota tribes escalating. Their husbands, 3 brothers who had brought the sisters west with promises of land and prosperity, had packed their valuables in the dead of night and fled eastward, leaving nothing but a hastily scribbled note. "Too dangerous. Every man for himself. Sorry." The sisters had awakened to find themselves alone, unprotected, with minimal supplies and the sounds of conflict drawing ever closer. "We should run too," Julia suggested, her voice barely audible over the distant commotion. Jessica shook her head firmly. "And go where? With what?" "They took the wagon, most of our food and all our money." Her green eyes hardened. "Those cowards left us to die." The cabin door suddenly rattled with the force of someone trying to enter. Josephine stifled a scream as Jessica grabbed the shotgun. Their father had insisted they bring west the one thing their husbands had overlooked in their hasty departure. "Get behind me," Jessica ordered, raising the weapon with trembling hands. The door burst open, and sunlight flooded the dim cabin along with the silhouettes of 3 tall men. They were not the raiders the sisters had feared, nor soldiers. Standing in their doorway were 3 Lakota warriors, their expressions a mixture of surprise and wariness as they took in the scene before them. 3 terrified white women, one pointing a shotgun that wavered dangerously in her inexperienced grip. The tallest of the warriors slowly raised his hands in a gesture of peace. Unlike what the sisters had been led to believe about savage Indians, he spoke in clear, if accented, English. "We mean no harm," he said, his deep voice calm despite the gun pointed at his chest. "Your settlement is being attacked by bandits using the conflict as cover. It is not safe here." Jessica didn't lower the shotgun. "Why should we trust you?" The warrior's dark eyes met hers steadily. "Because I am offering you life, and if you stay, you will find only death." A thunderous explosion from a nearby cabin punctuated his words, making the decision for them. The sisters had no choice but to place their trust in these unexpected saviors. What none of them realized as they fled the burning settlement was that this moment of desperation would be the beginning of a journey none had ever imagined, a journey that would challenge everything they had been taught about the people they now depended on for survival, and about their own capacity for love. The warrior who had spoken introduced himself as Lakota, which he explained meant friend to all in the Lakota language. His companions were his blood brothers Hada, whose name meant strong, and Tashunka, the horse. They moved with purpose and skill through the chaotic landscape, guiding the sisters away from danger with an efficiency that belied the sisters' preconceptions. As they rode double on the warriors' horses, putting distance between themselves and the smoldering remains of the settlement. Jessica clung reluctantly to Takota's waist. She found herself noting the strength in his back, the gentleness with which he handled his horse, and the way he constantly scanned their surroundings for threats. This was not the behavior of a savage, but of a protector. "Where are you taking us?" she finally asked, her voice carrying over the rhythm of hoofbeats. "To our village," Takota answered without turning. "It is 3 days' ride, but you will be safe there until this conflict passes." Jessica fell silent, contemplating the irony. Their husbands had abandoned them out of fear of the very people who were now risking their own safety to rescue them. They rode until dusk, stopping in a sheltered valley beside a small stream. While Hada and Tashunka secured the perimeter, Takota helped the exhausted sisters dismount. Up close, Jessica could see that he was perhaps in his late 20s, with intelligent eyes that seemed to assess everything with careful consideration. "Your husbands," Takota said as he worked to build a small, nearly smokeless fire. "They left you behind." It wasn't a question, but Jessica answered anyway. "Yes, when they heard about the trouble they packed up and ran, left us sleeping." Takota's expression darkened. "This is not the way of men with honor." "Apparently, it's the way of the Harrington brothers," Julia interjected bitterly. Josephine, who had been silent since their escape, finally spoke. "Why did you help us? Your people and ours. We're supposed to be enemies." Tashunka, returning from tending the horses, answered her. "Not all white people are enemies. Not all Lakota are friends. We judge by actions, not by the color of skin." Hada handed out strips of dried meat and offered the sisters water from a skin. "Rest. Tomorrow we continue." That night, huddled under blankets provided by their rescuers, the sisters whispered among themselves. "You think we can trust them?" Julia asked, her voice barely audible. Jessica watched the 3 warriors conversing quietly by the fire. "They saved us when our own husbands abandoned us. For now, I think we have little choice but to trust them." "They're nothing like what we were told," Josephine observed. "They speak English there. Kind." "Don't be naive, Joe," Julia cautioned. "We don't know their intentions." Jessica said nothing more, but as she drifted into an exhausted sleep, she found herself studying Takota's profile against the firelight, wondering about the man behind the warrior's exterior. The next morning brought a clear sky and a rigorous pace. As they rode, Takota explained that they were avoiding the main trails where both U.S. cavalry and hostile bands might be traveling. "The conflict is complicated," he told Jessica as they navigated through a narrow pass. "Some of my people fight because they see no choice. Others seek peace. The government makes promises with one hand and takes with the other." "And you?" Jessica asked. "What do you seek?" Takota was silent for a long moment. "A future where my people can live with dignity, where we do not have to choose between starvation on a reservation or war." His words stayed with Jessica throughout the day. By nightfall, when they made camp again, she found herself sitting beside him as he worked on repairing a torn saddlebag. "Your sisters," Takota said quietly. "They are afraid." Jessica nodded. "Everything we knew is gone. Our husbands betrayed us. We're traveling with men our parents would have called enemies. Fear seems reasonable." "And you?" His dark eyes met hers. "Are you afraid?" Jessica considered lying but found she couldn't. "Less than I was yesterday, less than I probably should be." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Good. Fear can keep you alive, but too much can stop you from living." Across the fire, Julia was engaged in conversation with Hada, who was showing her how to weave reeds into a small container. Jessica noticed how her sister's wary expression had softened, how she leaned slightly toward the warrior as he demonstrated the technique. Josephine sat slightly apart, staring into the flames, until Tashunka approached with a handful of berries he'd gathered. He offered them wordlessly, and after a moment's hesitation, she accepted. A small interaction, but Jessica didn't miss the way Josephine's fingers lingered when they touched his. The journey continued the following day, and with each passing mile, the dynamic between the unlikely companions shifted subtly. The warriors were not merely rescuers now, but individuals with names, stories, and personalities. Lakota was thoughtful and diplomatic, often mediating when cultural misunderstandings arose. Hada possessed a surprising sense of humor that emerged in unexpected moments, drawing reluctant smiles from Julia. And Tashunka, the quietest of the three, showed his character through actions rather than words, always the first to offer assistance, attentive to Josephine's comfort without being intrusive. By the third day, the terrain had changed dramatically. The open prairie gave way to more varied landscapes, rolling hills, stands of pine trees, and rock formations that seemed to Jessica like nature's sculptures. "We are close now," Lakota announced as they crested a hill in the late afternoon. Below them stretched a valley where a river wound like a silver ribbon. Near its banks, Jessica could make out a collection of structures, the Lakota village. "What will happen to us there?" she asked, unable to keep the apprehension from her voice. "You will be guests," Lakota assured her. "Our chief is a wise man who understands that this conflict will end someday. How we treat each other now will determine what comes after." As they descended toward the village, Jessica felt a mixture of trepidation and curiosity. Children were the first to spot their approach, running out to meet the returning warriors with excitement that turned to wide-eyed wonder at the sight of the three white women. Adults emerged from lodges, their expressions more guarded but not hostile. An older man stepped forward, tall and straight-backed despite his years, with deep lines etched into his face and long gray hair braided with feathers. Lakota dismounted and spoke to him in Lakota, gesturing occasionally toward the sisters. The old man listened intently, then approached them, studying each face in turn. "I am Chief Maka," he said in careful English. "My son tells me you were abandoned by those who should have protected you. This is a great dishonor." He extended his hands in a welcoming gesture. "You will stay with us until it is safe for you to decide your own path." Jessica, as the eldest, slid from Lakota's horse and stood before the chief. "We are grateful for your hospitality and for the bravery of your warriors. Without them, we would surely have died." The chief nodded in acknowledgement. "Come, you must be tired and hungry." They were led to a large lodge where several women waited. One, introduced as Lakota's widowed sister Winona, took charge of seeing to their needs. She provided clean clothing, soft deerskin dresses that were surprisingly comfortable, and showed them where they could wash away the dust of travel. "My brother says you are brave women," Winona told them as she helped Jessica comb the tangles from her hair. "To survive such betrayal requires strength." "We had little choice," Jessica replied. Winona smiled knowingly. "There is always a choice. Some choose to break. You did not." That evening they were invited to a council fire where the village gathered. The atmosphere was more festive than Jessica had expected, with music and stories shared. She observed Lakota speaking with various elders, respected and attentive in his interactions. "He will be chief one day," a voice said beside her, and Jessica turned to find an elderly woman watching her watch Lakota. "When his father joins the ancestors, he has the heart for it." Julia and Hada sat some distance away, deep in conversation. Jessica noticed how her sister's hands moved animatedly as she spoke, a glimpse of the vivacious woman she had been before her marriage to a man who had ultimately valued his own life above hers. Josephine had volunteered to help some of the younger women serve food, and Jessica watched with surprise as her shy sister navigated the unfamiliar social setting with growing confidence. Tashunka observed her too, his usually stoic expression softening whenever she passed nearby. Days in the village turned into weeks, and the sisters found themselves adapting to a way of life they had never imagined. They learned to contribute. Jessica discovered she had a talent for working with the horses. Julia's nimble fingers proved adept at beadwork, and Josephine's gentle nature made her a favorite among the village children, whom she began teaching English. The threat that had driven them from their settlement continued to simmer across the territory, making return impossible for the time being. But as spring blossomed into summer, Jessica realized something unexpected. She no longer thought of return as the goal. One evening, as she helped Lakota treat a mare with a leg injury, she found the courage to voice what had been in her heart. "I don't miss it," she confessed. "The settlement, the life we were supposed to have there." Lakota's hand stilled on the horse's leg. "What do you miss?" Jessica considered the question carefully. "The certainty, perhaps, knowing my place in the world." She looked around at the village, alive with the activities of daily life. "Here I'm still finding my way." "And your husband?" Lakota asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Do you miss him?" Jessica laughed bitterly. "Thomas Harrington was never truly my husband in any way that matters. Our marriage was a business arrangement between his family and mine. He needed a wife to help establish his claim. I thought I needed someone to give my life purpose." She stroked the mare's neck. "I was wrong about many things." Lakota straightened, studying her face in the fading light. "And now, what do you need now, Jessica Harrington?" The way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm beginning to think it might be something I never considered before." His hand reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "When you know, I hope you will tell me." Across the village, similar conversations were unfolding. Julia, sitting by the river with Hada, laughed as he told her stories of his childhood misadventures. "You remind me of the river," he told her, his expression serious despite his earlier humor. "On the surface, everyone sees the sparkle and movement, but there is depth that few take time to discover." Julia's smile faded. "William never tried to see beneath the surface. He wanted a pretty wife who would make his home comfortable and bear his children. Nothing more." Hada picked up a smooth stone and turned it in his fingers. "Then he was a fool who did not deserve the treasure he was given." He placed the stone in her palm, closing her fingers around it. "Some things appear ordinary until you hold them and feel their true nature." Julia looked down at their joined hands, then back to his face. "I'm beginning to understand that." Near the edge of the village, Josephine sat with several children who were teaching her Lakota words, giggling at her pronunciation. Tashunka approached, carrying a small wooden carving of a bird. "For you," he said simply, holding it out to her. "I noticed you watching the eagles yesterday." Josephine accepted the gift, turning it in her hands with wonder. The detail was exquisite, capturing the essence of flight in static wood. "It's beautiful, thank you." The children, sensing a moment not meant for them, scattered with knowing smiles. "You have changed," Tashunka observed, sitting beside her. "When we first met, you would not meet my eyes. Now you teach our children and learn our language." Josephine smiled softly. "I was trapped before in expectations, in fear. Harold never saw me, just the idea of a wife." She looked at the wooden eagle. "Here, I feel as though I'm learning to fly." Tashunka's hand found hers, tentative yet sure. "Then I am glad we found you that day." As summer ripened, so too did the bonds forming between the warriors and the sisters. It was Winona who first spoke openly of what the entire village had observed. My brother looks at you as a man looks at the sunrise, she told Jessica as they worked together grinding corn, with wonder and gratitude for each new day. Jessica felt heat rise to her cheeks. It's complicated. I'm still married in the eyes of the law, though abandoned. Winona shrugged. Laws of men change like the wind. The heart knows its own truth. She gave Jessica a knowing look. And your heart speaks clearly in your eyes when he is near. Jessica couldn't deny it. What had begun as gratitude had blossomed into something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken when Lakota was near and ache when he was absent. That evening, she found him alone by the river, watching the sunset paint the water with gold and crimson. "May I join you?" she asked, suddenly shy despite the months of growing closeness between them. He nodded, making space for her on the fallen log where he sat. For a while they watched the water in companionable silence. "There was news today," Lakota finally said. "A treaty has been signed. The fighting has stopped for now." Jessica felt a conflicting surge of emotions, relief that the bloodshed had paused, yet apprehension about what it meant for her future, for all their futures. "Does that mean it's safe to return to the settlements?" she asked, though the thought no longer held any appeal. "For those who wish to, yes." Lakota turned to face her, his expression solemn. "Do you wish to return, Jessica?" She met his gaze steadily. "No, there is nothing for me there." She took a deep breath. "But I don't know if I have the right to stay. I don't know if I belong here." "Where do you belong?" he asked, his voice low. Jessica found herself moving closer to him, drawn by something stronger than thought. "I'm beginning to think I belong wherever you are." The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Lakota reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and cupped her face in his hand. "I have hoped to hear you say this, but feared to hope too much. I never expected to find love here," Jessica whispered. "Especially not with a man so different from anyone I've known. But you see me the real me. No one has ever done that before." Lakota leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "In my language we have a word, wakin. It means sacred, mysterious. What grows between us is wakin. I do not question the Great Spirit's wisdom in bringing you to me." When his lips finally met hers, Jessica felt as though something long dormant within her had suddenly awakened. This was not the dutiful affection she had tried to feel for Thomas, but something wild and true that demanded nothing less than her whole heart. Similar revelations were occurring throughout the village. Julia, her initial wariness long since melted away, found in Hada a man who valued her mind as much as her beauty. His storytelling had captured her imagination, but it was his respect for her opinions that had captured her heart. "If the fighting is truly over," she told him as they walked along the edge of a meadow abloom with wildflowers, "people will start rebuilding. New settlers will come." Hada nodded gravely. "This is the way it has always been. The white man's hunger for land never ends." Julia stopped, turning to face him. "Not all white people are the same, just as you once told me not all Lakota are the same. I hope you can see that I'm not." He silenced her with a gentle finger to her lips. "I see you, Julia, not the color of your skin or the language of your birth. I see your spirit bright and brave." He took her hands in his. "I see the woman I've grown to love." Julia's eyes widened. It was the first time either of them had spoken the word aloud, though it had been growing between them for weeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "And it terrifies me because I don't know how to make a life between our two worlds." Hada gathered her into his arms. "We will make our own world, starting here, starting now." For Josephine and Tashunka, the acknowledgement of their feelings came differently. The quietest of the three sisters had found in the reserved warrior a kindred spirit who understood the power of silence and the eloquence of actions over words. They had taken to riding together at dawn, when the world was still and new. On one such morning, as they watched a family of deer drink from the misty river, Tashunka spoke of his childhood dream. "I wanted to be a healer," he confessed. "To know the plants that cure, the prayers that comfort, but my father was a great warrior, and I followed his path instead." Josephine studied his profile against the rising sun. "It's not too late. I've seen how gentle you are with the children, how you notice which herbs the healers gather." He turned to her with surprise. "You see much." "I see you," she said simply. "The man behind the warrior. The healer within the fighter." Her voice softened. "The heart that has somehow found room for mine." Tashunka dismounted and reached up to help her down from her horse. When her feet touched the ground, he didn't step back but kept his hands at her waist. "Josephine," he said, her name a prayer on his lips. "I have no right to ask, but my heart will not be silent any longer. Could you imagine a life here, with me?" Tears sprang to her eyes, but they were tears of joy. "I don't have to imagine it. I'm already living it every day, falling more in love with you with each sunrise." His kiss was gentle yet filled with promise, sealing an understanding between them that transcended the boundaries of their different worlds. As news of the treaty spread, the village held a council to discuss what it meant for their future. Chief Maka, his wisdom evident in every measured word, spoke of the need for adaptation without surrender. "The world is changing," he told his people. "We must find ways to preserve what is sacred while living in this new reality." After the council, he summoned the three sisters and the warriors to his lodge. His weathered face was solemn as he addressed them. "I have seen what grows between you," he said without preamble. "Love that crosses the boundaries others have drawn." He looked at each couple in turn. "Such bonds are rare and precious, but they also bring challenges." Jessica spoke for all of them. "We understand the difficulties, Chief Maka, but our hearts have chosen." The old chief nodded slowly. "Then there is a matter to address. In the eyes of your people's law, you are still bound to the men who abandoned you." It was a reality the sisters had discussed among themselves, but had been reluctant to confront fully. Their marriages, however loveless and betrayed, were legal bonds in the eyes of American law. "There may be a solution," Lakota said, looking to his father for approval. "The Indian agent who oversees this region is a fair man. He has some authority in such matters, if we could prove abandonment." "We have witnesses," Julia pointed out. "The entire settlement saw them flee while we slept." "And desertion is grounds for divorce in the Dakota territory," Jessica added. "If we could file the papers." Chief Maka considered this. "It would require a journey to the agency." "Not without risk, but perhaps necessary for the path you wish to walk." The decision was made. Lakota, Hada, and Tashunka would accompany the sisters to the Indian agency at Fort Thompson, where they would seek legal dissolution of their marriages and permission to remain with the Lakota tribe, not as captives or refugees, but as women who had chosen their own destinies. The journey took 4 days, during which they encountered curious glances and occasional hostility from settlers and soldiers they passed. Jessica found herself increasingly protective of their unusual party, proudly riding beside Lakota rather than shrinking from the disapproving stares. At Fort Thompson, the Indian agent, a surprisingly young man named Thomas Rogers, listened to their story with increasing astonishment. "Let me understand this clearly," he said, leaning forward across his desk. "You three were abandoned by your husbands during a raid, rescued by these Lakota warriors, and now wish to remain with the tribe permanently? As their wives?" "Yes," Jessica confirmed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Our former husbands forfeited any claim to us when they left us to die. We're requesting formal divorces on grounds of desertion and permission to stay with the Lakota people." Agent Rogers removed his spectacles and pinched the bridge of his nose. "This is highly irregular. The paperwork alone will be a nightmare." He sighed deeply. "However, the law is clear on abandonment, and there are precedents for white women choosing to remain with tribes voluntarily." He shuffled through some documents on his desk. "I'll need sworn statements from each of you, and ideally from any witnesses to the abandonment. There will be a waiting period for the divorces to be finalized." He glanced at the warriors, standing protectively behind the sisters. "And I should warn you that even with legal sanction, you will face prejudice and difficulty." "We understand the challenges," Julia said firmly. "We've made our choice." The following weeks were consumed with legal proceedings. The sisters provided detailed accounts of their abandonment, and to their surprise, a trader who had witnessed the Harrington brothers' hasty departure came forward to corroborate their story. Finally, on a crisp autumn day, Agent Rogers handed each sister a document officially dissolving their marriages to the Harrington brothers. "It's done," he told them, his expression a mixture of bewilderment and reluctant respect. "You are legally free to determine your own futures." He turned to the warriors. "I've also registered your intent to remain with the Lakota tribe as a matter of personal choice rather than captivity. It should provide some protection against misunderstandings." As they prepared to depart, Rogers pulled Jessica aside. Miss Harrington, are you certain about this course? There are settlements where you and your sisters could start over, find more conventional husbands." Jessica smiled at his concern. "We had conventional husbands, Agent Rogers. They left us to die." She glanced at Lakota, waiting patiently with his horse. "I found something I never thought possible: a man who sees me as an equal, who values my strength instead of fearing it. I won't trade that for convention." Rogers nodded slowly. "Then I wish you happiness, though I fear you've chosen a difficult road." "The worthwhile paths usually are," Jessica replied. They returned to the village heroes, bearing not only their freedom papers but also supplies Rogers had provided as a gesture of goodwill. The entire tribe celebrated with a feast that lasted well into the night, honoring both the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. In accordance with Lakota tradition, the couples would be married in a ceremony that honored the sacred nature of their unions. Under an autumn sky painted with stars, Jessica stood beside Lakota before the entire village, their hands bound together with a beaded leather cord. Chief Maka presided, his deep voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "Today, we witness the joining of hearts that found each other across great divides. The Great Spirit works in ways we cannot always understand, bringing together those who are meant to walk the same path." Lakota's eyes never left Jessica's as he spoke his vows in both Lakota and English. "I offer you my protection, my respect, and my heart's devotion. Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, not as two separate beings but as one spirit sharing two bodies." Jessica's voice trembled with emotion as she responded. "I come to you freely, choosing this path above all others. I offer you my strength, my loyalty, and my love without condition. I will stand beside you in joy and in sorrow, learning your ways and teaching you mine, until death parts us." Julia and Hada exchanged similar vows, her golden hair a striking contrast to his black, as they leaned close to seal their promises with a kiss. Josephine and Tashunka's ceremony was marked by the quiet intensity that characterized their relationship, their whispered vows no less powerful for their softness. As the celebration continued around them, The three couples slipped away to the new lodges that had been prepared for them, a blending of Lakota tradition with touches of the world the sisters had left behind. In the privacy of their lodge, Jessica and Lakota sat facing each other in the warm glow of the fire. He took her hands in his expression solemn yet filled with joy. "There is an old saying among my people," he told her. "When you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice." He brushed his lips against her knuckles. "I will spend my life trying to make you rejoice in each day we are given." Jessica leaned forward to kiss him, pouring all the love she had discovered within herself into that connection. "You already have," she whispered against his lips, "every day since you found me." Their coming together was a testament to the bridge they had built between their worlds, tender yet passionate, respectful yet uninhibited. As Jessica gave herself fully to the man who had not only saved her life, but had shown her what it meant to truly live, she knew she had found her true home. Winter descended upon the plains, bringing with it both hardship and a special intimacy, as the tribe gathered close for warmth and survival. The sisters, now fully accepted as part of the community, contributed their skills and adapted to the rhythms of Lakota winter life. Jessica discovered she had a talent for storytelling that bridged cultural divides, weaving tales from her childhood with the legends Lakota shared. Children gathered in their lodge on the coldest evenings, wide-eyed as she told stories of both worlds. Julia's artistic abilities flourished under the tutelage of the tribal elders. Her beadwork began to incorporate patterns that reflected both her new life and her past, creating unique designs that told the story of her journey. Josephine, true to her gentle nature, worked alongside the healers, combining the herbal knowledge she'd brought from her mother with the medicinal traditions of the Lakota. With Tashunka's encouragement, she began documenting these healing practices, creating a written record that honored both cultures. When spring finally returned to the plains, it brought with it new beginnings. Julia was the first to announce she was expecting a child, her radiant joy matched by Hada's proud disbelief as he placed a reverent hand on her still flat stomach. "A new life," he marveled, "born of both worlds." By summer, Jessica and Josephine had similar news to share, and the village celebrated the promise of new generations that would carry forward the unique legacy of these unprecedented unions. As her pregnancy progressed, Jessica often found herself reflecting on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this place. One evening, as she and Lakota sat watching the sunset, she shared these thoughts. "If the Harrington brothers hadn't abandoned us, we would never have found you," she mused, her hand resting on her swelling belly. "Something so terrible led to something so beautiful." Lakota nodded thoughtfully. "The Great Spirit's path is rarely straight. Sometimes what seems like the end is merely a turning point." "You ever wonder what happened to them?" Jessica asked. "Our former husbands." Lakota's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I try not to waste thoughts on men who did not value what they had. But I am grateful their foolishness brought you to me." The question was answered unexpectedly a month later when a military patrol passed near the village. The officer in charge, a Lieutenant James Wilson, brought news that surprised them all. The Harrington brothers returned to St. Louis, he informed them during a diplomatic meeting. Apparently they told quite a tale of barely escaping with their lives while their poor wives were carried off by savages. His eyes twinkled with barely suppressed amusement. "They'll be quite shocked to learn you're alive and well and remarried." "Let them believe what they wish," Jessica replied, exchanging glances with her sisters. "We've found our truth." Lieutenant Wilson nodded respectfully. "Indeed you have, madam, and if I may say so, you all appear to have thrived." He lowered his voice. "Times are changing. More and more, we're seeing people choose to cross the boundaries that once seemed fixed. It gives me hope for the future." That future arrived first for Julia, who gave birth to a son as summer waned. They named him Chaitin, meaning falcon in Lakota, with the middle name Robert after Julia's father. The child was a perfect blend of his parents, Hada's dark eyes set in a face that hinted at Julia's features. Jessica's daughter arrived with the first snow of winter, a girl they named Winona Jessica, honoring both Lakota's sister and Jessica's own identity. Josephine's twins, a boy and girl, came in the early spring, completing the circle of new life that had begun with their unexpected rescue more than a year before. As the seasons continued their eternal cycle, the sisters and their Lakota husbands created a life that defied categorization. They were neither fully of the white world nor entirely of the Lakota way, but something new, a bridge between cultures that demonstrated how love could transcend the artificial boundaries of race and background. Their children grew up speaking both English and Lakota, hearing stories from both traditions, and embodying the possibility of harmony in a time of division. They faced challenges, certainly suspicious looks from settlers, occasional hostility from tribes who resisted any accommodation with white ways, and the constant pressure of a changing world. But within their community, they found strength in their differences and wisdom in their shared humanity. Chief Maka, watching his grandchildren play with their cousins, often remarked that they represented the future, not the disappearance of the Lakota way, but its evolution and survival. 5 years after their unlikely rescue, as the sisters gathered to celebrate the anniversary of their Lakota weddings, Jessica proposed a toast. "To the worst day of our lives," she said, raising her cup with a smile, "which led to the best decision we ever made." Julia laughed, leaning against Hada's shoulder. "To cowardly husbands who didn't know what they were losing. And to brave warriors," Josephine added softly, "who recognized what they were finding." Lakota raised his own cup. "To the Great Spirit's wisdom, which is greater than our understanding." As the celebration continued around them, Jessica looked at her daughter playing with her cousins, at her sisters with the men who had become their true partners, at the community that had embraced them all. The abandoned brides had found not just rescue but redemption, not merely safety but love, in the most unexpected of places. And as the sun set over the plains, painting the sky in colors no artist could capture, Jessica knew with absolute certainty that some journeys, though they begin in betrayal and fear, lead exactly where the heart is meant to find its home.